Hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my amazing fellow homeschool mom co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Hey. So this is our weekly book club episode, and if you're new to the podcast, please don't worry. We are the most flexible book club you've ever joined. We don't expect you to read the book, and you don't have to show up and drink wine with us if you don't want.
Wine is welcome. Your choice. We don't judge, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so absolutely. You're welcome to read the book with us. We like this book. Sometimes we have never read the book and we pick it and we're like, this book is terrible. But this book is great. We're reading Differently Wired by Reber and we think you will love it. So you can read along with us, or you can just come and tune into these episodes and listen to us gab about the book and listen along. So whatever works for you works for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few things to keep in mind. Number one, we are unfiltered. We are true to our name. It is accurate. We show up as ourselves. We don't polish or hide anything. We both love homeschooling and we both absolutely love being with our respective kids. But that doesn't mean that some days aren't just freaking hard.
Yes. So the second thing you need to know about us is that we are a secular and progressive space. Progressive meaning we believe that women's rights and trans rights are sacrosanct. We believe vaccines save lives. We believe Black Lives Matter, and due process for absolutely everyone is essential to any society that we would like to be a part of. So yes, secular and progressive do coexist in the homeschool world. Hard to find, but we do exist. You are not alone. And now the good news is you have found us. We have this wonderful community of like-minded homeschoolers and progressive homeschoolers that have developed around this podcast, and it's literally thousands strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, right? It's just nice to know that we aren't alone these days. Like, even if it's hard to find them out in the wild, like, we're not alone. So that said, let's dive into book club. Today, we're going to be talking about tilts 11 and 12. For a hot minute, we thought about trying to include a third tilt, but history has shown us that we are terrible at getting through 3. Heck, sometimes we can't even get through the 2. This is the second time we're going to try to publish this, and it's the 4th time we've tried to record it. Hopefully, this one's actually going to work. We're going to get the whole thing recorded. The sound will be of a good enough quality. You can hear us and we don't have to just scrap the whole thing. So yeah, not polished. 2 moms doing their best with the podcast. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive in.
Yeah. And if anybody's watching the video today, I am like the least polished person. We got caught in torrential rain today. And I was like, oh, well. And my hair just went back in a ponytail and here I am. So yeah, well, not polished.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So tilt 11 is called Let Go of Your Impossible Expectations for Who You, quote unquote, should be as a parent. And this is one of those things, right? I think we all know that we need to do this, but we're not necessarily great at doing it in the day-to-day. So she starts out this chapter, section 184. She's telling a story about how she doesn't always nail it either, right? She wants to make sure people understand, like, hey, just because I write this book and I host this community and I do these things, like I make the same mistakes. And she gives an example where like she's super dysregulated, her kiddo is super dysregulated, like together it's just like a hot mess of hot messes. And she says in the really snippy way, like, always a pleasure to do business with you. And that's so much clearer to me now that you've yelled it at me. Thanks. I know I just had to snicker. Like, this is not Megan's parenting style. This is absolutely my parenting style. I 100% would have said something like this. So just that thing, right? Obviously, it isn't ideal. But the whole point of this chapter is that we're human. And if we use snark, or one of our coping strategies is, sarcasm, and it comes out at not the best times or not the best ways, we're deserving of grace too.
Yeah. We do have our own use for snark and sarcasm in our household as well, too. It is one of our many love languages here. So I can completely understand.
Yeah.
Then we both have the same note on 185, where she says, But there's an even higher cost of all of this judging. Demanding perfection from ourselves inadvertently sends the message to our kids. Perfection is what we expect from them. We miss out on opportunities to model flaws, failure, and growth. And I think sometimes, like, I don't know, as women in our 40s, this was kind of the mentality, right? I mean, this was your worth is tied to your productivity, perfection, people pleasing, all that was kind of the world that we were raised in. And you can think to yourself, okay, I'm trying to break some of these things or whatever the case might be. But then when we think about the ways that it trickles down and affects our kids without us even realizing it, it's like, oh crap, now I really do have to work on some of these things that we've picked up and these habits that we've kind of assumed over our time. And I was like, oof, when I read that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I am a really big believer in the idea that like when we make a mistake, the way that we handle it is the best learning, right? The best teaching moment we can create for our kiddos is this like modeling how to handle it well and how to, you can't really fix a mistake, but you know how to address it and move on from it. But I think that's something like all caregivers really struggle with. And possibly for slightly different reasons. Like you mentioned the idea of like women in our 40s, and you know, there are all of those fun memes about like, oh, if you were in the talented and gifted program and you were the firstborn daughter, you know, like welcome to, you know, there's that kind of stuff. But then there's also the reality of like if you are maybe the primary breadwinner in your family and what that looks like. And, you know, there's a lot of work right now around this idea of being able to say, I'm sorry, or being able to be vulnerable. And that hasn't really been something that's been okay, but it's so important in like a healthy parenting caregiver dynamic or relationship. Hard, right? Like, I don't think any of us are going to sit here and be like, so easy, just change how you parent and how you grew up being parented. Like, but really important.
Yeah, shift your entire mindset and remember to do it in times of stress as well.
Yeah, right. So easy.
Yeah.
All right.
When everything's going wrong, remember to do everything the exact opposite of what is known to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then the next section is called Expecting Perfection.
Mhm.
I did not get as much out of this section as you did, Megan. So I'll let you go to town on it.
I just highlighted some stuff that I thought was super interesting, right? So there's a section here where she's talking about helicopter parenting, and she says parenting perfection is partly responsible for another harmful trend, helicopter parenting, and basically talks about the fact that in an attempt to shield our kids from experiencing anything difficult in life or painful or challenging, in other words, life, we are doing them a disservice. Then a little further down, she goes on to talk about the tiger mom phenomenon. And it says most parents of atypical kids can't quote unquote tiger mom them into being compliant, emotionally regulated overachievers. And if that's what we're trying to do, it won't feel good for anybody involved. And I think sometimes that's kind of the mentality that we were raised with, right? And so if the opposite of that, if you have a kiddo who's not compliant, for example, or who's not emotionally regulated or who's an quote unquote underachiever, this thought process that we, you know, nail down harder and push harder and all of that. And I know, like, especially for my third kiddo, the harder I push, the harder he pulls back or the harder he pushes back. And it's just, we get nowhere fast. And so we had to let go of that many, many years ago. So I thought that was an interesting note. And then I think the last highlight that I made here was a quote by a psychoanalyst, H. David Stein, MD. And this is from a blog, I think, on parents.com. And it said, parents who cannot tolerate their imperfections often cannot tolerate their children's either. As a result, kids will feel that their parents are dissatisfied with them, even if it's not stated. They pick up on the subtle cues. And then Debbie Reber goes on to say, when you consider that quote in the context of differently wired kids who are already picking up on many not so subtle cues that there's something quote unquote wrong with them, the implications of demanding perfection from ourselves need to be taken seriously. And that I thought was really big.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with all of those. That whole quote that you said earlier about the like tiger momming kids into being compliant, emotionally regulated overachievers. And I think that that piece and really this whole section for me goes back to some of the other tilts that we've already read, right? This idea like you can't force it. the only thing you can do as the parent or the caregiver in this situation is create an environment that fosters calm and regulation and helps kids step out of that fight or flight mode. And if you're able to do that, right, then you're able to help them become more emotionally regulated on the regular, right? As that being kind of a more standard state of things. And then you have a better chance at life just being a little bit more smooth. But that's almost like creating this environment of calm and regulation is almost the exact opposite of what you think of when you think of like tiger momming the shit out of things, right? So remembering how you're going to make that work. They're not the same thing. All right, so the next section in the book is called When We Drop the Expectations. So for me, I just pulled out a quote on 187. The quote says, "And most powerfully, we can model what healthy and beautiful imperfection looks like. We can let our kids see us fumble, recover, and try again." And this is that same thing, right? We were just talking about it. This whole tilt is about these kinds of ideas. But I do just personally really like the fact that this tilt is encouraging us to give ourselves grace, like cut yourself some slack. We are all human, and anyone who can look you in the face and tell you that they're perfect is lying through their teeth. Just ignore them.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, for sure. And then I had the last note in this little section here. But as you mentioned earlier, we previously recorded this and we had sound issues and whatever. And so I'm still holding on to the fact that you told me that when I shared this at the last time we recorded it, that you didn't love this part because I beat myself up over this one a little bit. So it was a quote by this person who runs a blog, I think, called Momastery, Glennon Doyle. This is something from Oprah.com. And anyway, this person says, "What if it has never been our job or our right to protect our children from every incoming bump and bruise?" And I was like, well, I think especially with my third kiddo, not only am I doing that, I think everyone around him is doing that because the implication of those bumps and bruises is so, cataclysmic meltdown level sometimes, or just emotionally devastating for everyone involved and all of that. And so when I first read this, I was like, oh my gosh, like how and when do I even begin to back off of that? But the last time we read this, you said you didn't love that part. So I felt a little bit better about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? I don't think I'm not going to argue, right, that it's not. I do believe, let me put it in a positive way. I do believe that we need to allow our kids to fail in safe ways. This is the time to practice that and to work through how that feels and what that looks like and how we pick ourselves up. And if we try again or if we go a different route, I 100% believe that we do. But this idea that like, whoa, it's important to make sure that they hit all of the bumps and bruises, like that's dumb. That's dumb.
Thank you.
Why did you even have kids and decide to parent a kid if you're like, what? You made it out of my womb alive, so good luck.
He like a baby sea turtle. Like, get yourself out of the hole and find the ocean.
Exactly. And if you get eaten on the way, it's your own damn fault.
You were 5 hours old. You should have known to watch out for raccoons.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh. We should record all of our episodes 4 times. We get like really good by the like, are they about sea turtles? What is happening here?
Just along for the ride. No worries. All right. So the next section is called Unleash Your Inner Critic. I don't actually like this title for this section. And the quote that I pulled out, it's on 189. And she kind of wraps up this section with this quote saying, "Become cognizant of times when you judge and shame yourself for parenting decisions, in the moment reactions, and other things that result in your feeling like a failure. And then tame your inner critic." And I think that "tame your inner critic" would have been a far better title for this section because I feel like she's just talking about the fact that we do this, right? We criticize the mistakes that we made. We criticize ourselves. She uses examples of like how women will be like, oh, this outfit doesn't fit me right. Or, look at my wrinkles, or, oh, should I cover my gray hair? Like these kinds of ideas. And we're our own worst critic. And I think that that's true for men, women, and anyone on the spectrum in between there, right? Like we love to be our own worst critic, but it's not helpful. And this idea of like just work on becoming aware of when you're doing it and kind of just, again, we talked about it before, right? Like just completely change your mindset, especially when things are stressful and everything is going wrong. It's not easy. No one's claiming it's easy, but being able to like tame that and kind of pull back, like this is not helpful. This is not doing anything productive. Like let's move on and focus on something that might actually be productive.
I do like that. I can completely see what you're saying, right? Because unleashing your inner critic means like, go ahead, criticize yourself until you just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. Let them loose.
Yeah. You suck at everything.
Now go parent well. Good. Good.
Do it completely intuitively, but different than anything you've ever experienced in your life.
Can't possibly go wrong.
No.
All right. So then the next section is called Stop Shoulding on Yourself. And now you're going to be shocked to hear me say this, but I'm of two minds with this one. Right. First off, it's a bit of potty humor, which is like really not my thing. And it's not our family's thing. But it is definitely a memorable saying. And it does get a point across that I think wouldn't be quite as effective without the saying and the rewording of the saying, right? So yes, stop shoulding on yourself. On page 190, I pulled out this quote that says, generally speaking, the word should isn't super helpful. It places demands and expectations and judgments where they don't need to exist. And I was like, I mean, she wrote a lot in here. There are lots of words, but I felt like that quote for me kind of like summed up all of the paragraphs. Like should isn't very helpful. Like stop using it. Stop including it as much. It's not helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I liked this section because it was all about questioning the status quo, which is basically what I do all the time. Because I'm always like, well, why do we really have to do it that way? I'm kind of like an annoying toddler that has never really grown out of that phase of being like, but why does it have to be that way? But why? But that doesn't make any sense, right? And I'm still doing that at 44 years of age. So I liked that because I'm like, who says it should be that way? Who are these people? So that's kind of my jam. I liked it.
Yeah. All right. So then we're almost done with this tilt. Look at us. When we have to record it 4 times, it goes a lot faster. So the last section in this tilt is titled Take What Works and Let Go of the Rest. So on page 193, she is wrapping it up and she says, kind of a long quote, so stick with me, but I thought it was solid. She says, part of letting go of our expectations of who we should be as parents means understanding where our experience fits in with the noise around us. It's important to recognize when the media we're consuming are subconsciously sending the message that we're not doing a good job. Just like straining the pulp from the juice, we want to put parenting media through our own filter. Hold on to only those things that feel positive and useful in relation to our circumstances and simply let the rest go. And it's one of those things, I think on some level, we all know that, right? This is one of those things. On some level, we all know, like, well, if it doesn't apply to you, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. Like the world is full of those kinds of sayings. But it does not change the fact that as social media has become more and more and more of a thing, so many of us are looking at things and watching things and being like, well, it worked for them. Like, I should try to make it work for me, or maybe we need to try to do this, or maybe we need to try to do that. And then when it doesn't work, or when you're like, I'm not even going to try that because I can't even imagine how awful that's going to go. Right. And then you're like, because there's something wrong with my family, right? Because we can't do, like, it doesn't have to, Yeah. That analogy of like strain the pulp from the juice, keep what
Hmm.
works, ignore the rest, throw the rest away, or use it for
Hmm.
something else. Fodder,
Yeah, I
a
love that.
fire, a bonfire. All
All right.
right.
So start now box.
Yeah.
So she talks about here writing out an affirmation centered on your intention to parent your child in the best way you can right now. For instance, I am doing the best I can with the information and resources I have available to me, and I am working toward becoming an even better parent every day. I feel like, yes, this is super helpful for raising differently wired kiddos, but I feel like that's just great advice too for like new homeschoolers, right?
Mhm.
Like, I am doing the best that I can with what I know right now. It will shift, it will evolve, but I am doing a good job. And so I like it. You could
Yeah.
apply that to lots of things.
Yeah, you could. And if I was a mantra saying person, I would apply it. But if you're listening and you like mantras, you go on with your bad self. You and Megan can mantra all day long.
Take it and run with it. All right. So that wraps up Tilt 11. Look at us go. Hello. We are going to hop over to Tilt 12 momentarily. Before we do, though, we just wanted to remind you that we have a Buy Us a Coffee page. So if you consume content anywhere else, you're probably familiar with Buy Us a Coffee. If you're not familiar, spoiler alert, it's not a real coffee. It's basically just like a tip jar at a coffee counter or something, like kind of like, an open guitar case for somebody who's busking. So if you enjoy our content and you're thinking, I'm not ready to join their Patreon and like become a whole full-fledged thing, but this book series that they've been doing for the past like 6.5 months, where they've really deep dived on this book for a really long time, has been pretty helpful for me. And it's taken a few things away from this. If you want to say thank you, there's a link in our show notes to our Buy Me a Coffee, and you can go in there and you can do a one-time purchase. You can set up you can set up a recurring purchase. And we always get like super duper excited when we get coffees. So like whoever sees it first is like, Amanda, did you see? Somebody bought us a coffee. And we get really excited about it. So
Yeah. And I'll do a shout out. So if you do buy us a coffee, keep an eye out on our Instagram stories. We always do a shout out in our stories as a thank you, assuming you don't make it anonymous. If you make it anonymous, we won't say anything. But yeah, we do totally appreciate it. And if you're like me and like trying to go track down links is like nearly impossible, all you have to do is Google any of the things that we tell you about, right? Like you can do Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, Buy Me a Coffee, Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, Teachers Pay Teachers, like any of those. That's how I find all of them. I should be able to find them more easily than that, but I Google all of them with whatever I'm looking for, and that's how I find our page. So feel no shame if that's how you have to find them yourself.
you just shitted yourself though, Amanda. I'm calling you out on it. Okay. Stop
Yeah,
shitting
well.
on yourself.
I should. That's all I can. That's oh man. All right. So tilt 12. Make a ruckus when you need to. So this is something you should do.
Yeah. I feel like I'm pretty good at making a ruckus when I need to. It's not my nature. I don't like confrontation, but if I need to, especially if I need to for one of my kids, you'll be hearing from me, right? You'll be
Yeah.
hearing from me. So the first section here, so there's always kind of this opening section where she kind of introduces the concept. Then we go into this section called Why We Need to Advocate. And we've both got the same highlight here, which is forget thriving. Many differently wired kids are simply trying to exist in environments that may as well have been designed specifically to speed up their descent into anxiety, stress, and unhappiness. And I really thought that was quite meaningful. And then you had another part that you liked, Amanda.
Yeah. So for me, she goes on to say, unfortunately, many atypical kids begin normalizing their negative experiences. Being teased or bullied becomes just another day at school. Being publicly shamed by teachers is just what happens. Hating school and everything about it becomes the new norm. And
Mhm.
for me, I have a friend who is struggling with this right now, right? And I know a few other people, it just kind of happened that I think as you get like closer to the end of the school year, this stuff kind of reaches a breaking point for a lot of families. And so when I read this, I was like, oh man, I was just really thinking of some friends who are struggling with this, where their kiddos are, they're they're normalizing these really crappy things, and they're not wanting to let go of it or to remove themselves from the situation
Mm.
because it has become so normal, and they don't want to give up their friendships, or the fear of the new, the fear of the different is really hard and scary. And I get all of that. I do. I'm not downplaying that. It just makes me really sad that so often for a lot of atypical kids, like this normalizing of negative things is just, it just is what it is. And it's such an unfortunate way to like go out into the world knowing that you're going to get shit on. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember if we talked about it when we recorded this the first time, the episode that had sound issues or not, or if I said it in a different episode. So if it was in a recent episode and now I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. But it reminds me here in this section of books that exist for young people. So I host quite a bit of online book club discussions and things like that for middle schoolers and high schoolers. And when I'm sifting through and looking for books, sometimes there's this predominant trend in books for that age group and even younger, but I don't teach that age, so I don't sift through those quite as much. But there's this predominant theme that's talking about hating school, being bullied, having a mean teacher, right? Dealing with mean girls. It's kind of this whole thing. And there's so many books that cover this. And it's like, for me, there's a bit of a chicken or the egg thing going on there. It's like, is it happening in books because we know kids are going to be dealing with it, and so we're using these books to give them the tools to deal with it or realize that they're not alone? But then on the flip side of the chicken or the egg situation, is it also kind of a more nefarious thing, even if it's not consciously being done that way, to get kids to accept that this is reality and to not question the fact that they're being bullied or that they're miserable in school or whatever the case might be? And it's like, yeah, but that's just how it is, right? Like, it's in all these books, and this is just the reality because they're seeing it through all this media, because we see it in movies and TV shows and stuff like that too. And the reality is it doesn't have to be that way, but we've kind of put that out there as kind of this baseline experience for kids. And it is sad.
Yeah, no, that actually, I might have told the story on the podcast before, so if so, feel free to ignore it. But it totally reminds me, my kiddo was going to his first like big summer camp. He was in between second and third grade, and he's a voracious reader. So he'd read a lot of books up into like middle grades, chapter books. And we were talking about all kinds of different things and prepping because as a homeschool kid, it had been quite a while since he had gone to anything for, like 8, 9 hours a day. And we didn't know anyone who was going to be there. And I was just like, be kind, be a good listener, all of these, make sure you have fun. The main rules of summer camp are to have fun and, be a good listener. And I said something about making friends, and he turned to me and completely seriously was like, well, I don't think I'm going to make friends, especially not the first week, because that's not how it works in school. And it made me so sad that that was like his takeaway from all of the books that he's read, that like it's hard to make friends. And when you put yourself out there and you go to a new school or you go to a new thing, like don't expect people to be kind to you and to make friends right away. And then he was like so stoked and jazzed when he came home at the end of the day. He's like, I've got friends. Like people wanted to talk to me. I'm like, of course they did, like, and that's, if your kiddo's not like that, he's an extrovert. He gets that from me. He can talk to anyone. So I was not concerned from that regard, but just that idea of like, it had been completely normalized to that, like you go to school and it's going to be bad. And I'm like,
Yeah, you'll be a social outcast. You'll be picked on for the things that are different about you, right? I mean, we've got how many books, TV shows, movies, whatever, that all deal with that. It's terrible.
Yeah. All right. So still in that same section on page 196, there was another quote that I pulled out. She says, one last point. There is a difference between advocating for our child and being a helicopter parent. She goes on to say, I'm proposing we figure out how to advocate for our children in a way that helps them more fully be themselves. I'm suggesting that we don't accept half-assed solutions to our children's challenges, but rather push for meaningful resolutions, the kind that move the conversation forward and make things better for every differently wired kid who will follow in our child's footsteps. And it's that thing. Again, I think it's a great point. I definitely try to advocate with that in mind, but sometimes it's hard, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you're going up against and what fight you're fighting, sometimes you're like, if you manage to achieve anything for your own kiddo, you're like, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done. We did it. I'm done.
Yeah.
And it's hard to always take that step back and be like, am I doing this in a way that paves the road for the next to come, right? Like, yes, it's a good thing. We should totally do that. That idea, we've talked about it before, but like holding the door open for the person behind you versus like shutting it in their face and telling them good luck. But man, sometimes it's hard.
Mm-hmm. It totally is. When you read that out loud, and I highlighted it when I read it too, but listening to you read it, when I heard I'm suggesting that we don't accept half-assed solutions to our children's challenges, but rather push for meaningful solutions. And all I could think of there was like every IEP I've ever read or written, right, or heard about, right? Was like most of them are half-assed solutions to our children's challenges. You're not getting, it's like you're fighting to get the bare minimum for your kids.
Mhm.
And that's it, right? And so, and we talk to people, I think because I'm in all the autism parenting and homeschooling groups too, right? And there's so many people that are afraid to let go of that IEP because they fought so hard to get it. And it's the thing that they know. So it's like, what if I give this up? And you've brought up before the fact that like it'll still be there. But then on top of it, it's like, but that IEP usually isn't even that strong, right? It's usually not even what your kids actually need. It's just the bare minimum that you're able to get somebody to agree to so graciously give you. So
Yeah.
we're done with the
Yeah.
half-ass solutions.
That's it. But I mean, it's hard, like I
Yeah.
just had a meeting last week with someone here in California and it was my own version of coaching. We do coaching for people, but that doesn't mean that we have all of the answers. Megan and I have both met with people that helped coach us on X, Y, or Z. And I was doing my own here, trying to understand some things for my kiddo. And she was like, I really think that we're probably going to want to be sooner rather than later looking at getting an actual IEP or at the very least a 504 written and in place before we start looking at putting you into community college classes. Not me, my kiddo. And I was like, like, yes.
Like, I know you're
Okay.
right, but I don't want to.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the next section, not my IEP worries and concerns. The next section, it says you've got to ask to get.
Hmm. And then what do we have there? We both have, same story. We are like in sync with these notes this time. We've both got the
Yeah.
same story here. So, okay, so we both have the notes about the same story, but we came away with different things, right? Which was she's talking about this woman Brandy, who thinks her kid is, I think it's autistic, right? And she keeps going to doctors and she's not getting the diagnosis that she feels is accurate for her kiddo. And so she keeps going and going until she finds a doctor who she's like, yes, they finally got my kid. And so my takeaway is a little bit different than yours. Do you want to share yours first? Because it is much more related to the topic.
Oh, well, for me, it's just that thing. We've talked about it in our regular podcast, but the struggle to get an accurate diagnosis is a real challenge. And if you're here, if you're in this place, like my thing was just know that you aren't alone. It's not easy in the United States, especially, but in a lot of other countries. We have friends in some other countries that I was talking to about this same kind of issue and struggle. It's expensive. If you go through the school, you may or may not get an accurate diagnosis because the more you need, the more they have to give and the more that costs and the more challenging that is and what all of that looks like. Or if they're even particularly well versed in the really
Mhm.
complicated things, right? Especially if you have a twice exceptional kiddo or if you've got a daughter who is on the spectrum, right? Who like where she falls on that could greatly impact whether or not you're getting a diagnosis with doctors these days. There's been more and more knowledge about that and more media coverage around that. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction. But yeah, it can be hard. So if you're struggling with that, just know that you aren't alone.
Hmm. My takeaway was completely different, even though it's the exact same story. My thought with this was, how do you know as a parent when you yourself have lost focus? And maybe this is a time when you're talking to friends or coaching, or, hopefully you have a pediatrician you can really trust or something like that. But this feels a lot to me like doctor shopping. And I'm not criticizing this mother at all, but in that type of scenario where it's like, I didn't get the diagnosis that I think is accurate, go to another, I still didn't get it. I still didn't get it. Right. And just continuing to go. And so it's like, at what point do you stop and be like, okay, well, like 7 doctors have told me this thing. And do you trust it and maybe think like, I'm the one who's missing the ship here? And for me, I would start to lose that focus there. And the example that comes to mind for me, and I know this isn't the same thing as having a kid or anything like that, right? But my soulmate was a 10-pound dachshund. She was like the love of my life. And she was sick. And I was sitting there looking at her and watching her go through kind of, we did treatments. And I mean, I did everything short of cloning this dog to try to save her life. She was doing acupuncture and experimental infusion therapy, all this kind of stuff. And I know there were people who were judging me who were like, she's a nut and she needs to put this dog down. Like, this is ridiculous. But then I would watch her and she'd have a day where she was a little peppier than she was typically. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, look, she's doing better. She's doing better. And then I'd be like, but wait a second, is she really doing better? Or am I just hoping she's doing better so that I'm seeing things and making it more than it is? And I had completely lost the plot. And I really had to talk to her veterinarian and be like, if we reach a point where you feel that I am being cruel or unfair, like, I'm going to need you to tell me, because I cannot see things clearly at this point. We are too deep in. And so I kind of had that same vibe from reading this story. And again, I'm not judging this particular mother. She knows her kid way better than I do. And so I'm happy she ended up wherever she needed to be. But if I was in this same exact situation, I would start to think like, am I seeing things that aren't there? How come nobody else is seeing this? And then when I did finally get the diagnosis at the end, I'd be like, but is it accurate? Or is it just because I finally found somebody who was willing to agree with me? So for me, I would still struggle with all of that. So if you're in that boat and you're just as neurotic as I am, like, you're in good company. So welcome. you know?
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not going to discount that, right? Like, we've talked many times on the podcast in general. I'm disabled. I have a lot of health problems. And that for me started in my mid-20s. And it was a couple of years of specialist shopping. And so I do get that, right? And half the specialists I saw were like, well, there's definitely something wrong, but I have no idea what it is. Why don't you try this kind of doctor? And half of them would be like, you're perfectly fine. And I'm like, well, that's
It's all in your
interesting.
head.
Yeah, like my foot is dragging behind me and I have this other thing, but like, yeah, I'm totally fine. And at one point, one of the specialists actually sent me to a psychologist who literally their whole job, actually it might have been a psychiatrist, but their whole job was to like meet people and figure out if it was just in their head or if they actually had some like really rare thing that they were missing. And I was very fortunate because he was very much like, there's definitely something truly like physically wrong with you. Like, let's keep working on it and figuring out what it is. And I, 100% think that in the long run saved my life. But it's very easy, right, to start wondering, hey, is it me? Am I like making something out of nothing?
Right.
Like, is it in my head? And so yeah, it's true. It's hard. It's all hard. There's nothing easy about being atypical in any way, shape, or form, whether it's health or trying to figure out other types of diagnoses. Like, and it's all just not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so look at that. We only have a couple sections left to go. So
We're
the
on
next
fire.
section, I know we are. The next section is called Be Kind and Clear, Not Pushy. I wonder how many people know the difference these days. On page 201, the quote says, after all, these people, coaches, counselors, and anyone else who works with our children, want to do right by our kids, but they may not know how. And for me, I think generally speaking, we know this logically. People who are working with our kids, whether it's in an after school program or it's the doctors or the therapists or whoever, right? I think very few people go into a profession working with kids because they don't like kids or they they want to screw them over and make sure they fail as human beings.
I mean,
It
generally, they're not making good money. So it's not like they're there for the money and the kids are the byproducts, you know?
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's that thing. Like, they're there for the right reasons, generally speaking, but it doesn't mean that they get your kiddo. It doesn't mean that they have any actual experience with your specific situation or your specific set of diagnoses or whatever that may be. And I think that that can make it hard to remember when you're actually like in this moment, right? You're really having to fight for your child and plead their case, and sometimes it's like, I just need you to, yeah,
Hmm.
you shouldn't tell him to sit down and shut up, because I'm pretty sure that doesn't fall under be kind and clear and not pushy. But sometimes it feels like saying that, right?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing too, like I hadn't even had a chance to tell you this, but we had a situation the other day where we were signed up for a walking tour through Airbnb where you can do the experiences. And we went and the tour guide was an older gentleman and we were having a bit of a day. I talked about it in the Tuesday episode last week. I don't even know what day it is at this point. I think this week, last week, something, I don't know. But I talked about ugly crying and it was all part of that, right? And so we showed up for the tour and my kids actually got there before I did because I was dealing with kerfuffle. And the tour guide had given my youngest a hard time about wearing headphones. And he had taken one of his headphones off, like to be able to hear once the tour started. And the guy, like really snarky, said to him, "Oh, so now you can hear me," or something like that. And I was like, he's not somebody who specifically works with kids. He's a tour guide. He happens to engage with kids. We're also in Central Europe, which isn't exactly the most neurodivergent affirming area in the world. But I had enough going on that day. But typically be like, hey, dude, like he's autistic. You want to leave him alone? He's still listening to you. He's not being rude. If he's on the tour, he's here to learn and he's interested. So back off. But I was already in a state myself, so that didn't happen. And we ended up bailing on the tour actually. But anyway, yeah, you just run into people like that sometimes who don't get it, and it's like, do you take the time? Do you educate? Do you not? Do you whatever, right? It's a lot.
Yeah, it is for
Yeah.
sure. And I mean, that rolls in perfectly to the last section of this tilt, because the last section is called "Don't Take No for an Answer." And again, it's that thing. In theory, I think we all agree with it. If you know what you're advocating for, if you're advocating for your child, don't take no for an answer. Sure. But also, it's hard. Sometimes it's like, I'm not sure it's even worth it anymore. Am I going to get what I want by continuing to fight this fight? Or am I just going to be really freaking tired and, still having to make my own solutions outside of what I'm looking for? Tour guides in foreign countries are a perfect example of that. We do that all the time. And I often think like, man, this person probably sees half a dozen kids on their tour, on their like walking history tour a year, like max, right? Like there cannot be that many people who are like, yeah, let me take my, elementary age child on a walking tour for, historical, whatever. And then how often do they actually take your kids seriously when they try to engage them on a discussion about geopolitics and whatever else? Like they don't, but do I just like, oh, it was a morning, or do I take the time to advocate and try to be like, no, you should actually listen to him because he's very well informed on these things and he's quite well read and yada yada yada. Like,
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, it's one of those mothers,
yep,
right? Yeah. We did not take the time. Like I said, there were other things going on, but we ended up going to a McDonald's and getting ice cream and enjoying air conditioning and Wi-Fi for half an hour and regrouping.
yeah. And you know
And it
what?
worked.
Sometimes that's it. Sometimes regrouping is way more important than putting in the time to educate other people, right? Sometimes you gotta, for as much as I agree with this tilt and this idea that you have to ask to get, right? I do also think that sometimes it's okay to do some self-care, which was a previous tilt, and, step back and regroup and just worry about your own little unit and not advocate and educate. Sometimes that's all you've got the energy for.
So
All right. So that brings us to our last bit for this section anyway, and that's the start now box. So these are supposed to be easy, bite-sized nuggets that aren't a big lift. This one says, identify at least one area of quote unquote least satisfaction with regard to something happening with your child at school or in another institution, sport, group, organization, etc. Put on your advocacy hat and respectfully and intentionally speak up for the change or action you'd like to see.
Yeah, that's it. I highlighted that last sentence too about putting on your advocacy hat. And yeah, I mean, that's just the life of a parent of a differently wired child, right? I mean, that's what you're going to do. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day because I mentioned in our other episode that our Airbnb host was being difficult and whatever, and was giving me a tough time about Liam's service dog. And I was talking to this other mom and I said, if you think that as a parent of an autistic child with like moderate support needs, that I don't freaking know what my rights are. Like, of course I know what my rights are because it's my job all day long to make sure that his needs are being met. So I'm like, you're going to come in here and go against it. I'm like, I guarantee you I'm going to win this one, pal, because I know the policy inside and out. Right. So yeah, that's our job. And it's a big one. And it's not one that I think any of us are like, oh, love this job, but it's a necessity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. It's a lot of work, but it's there. We do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. So before we go, we would love to just take a quick minute to ask you to give us a like, a follow, and or a review wherever you're listening. I promise that we aren't needy, insecure people. Like truly, truly, I promise. But the reality of podcasting is that it is all about keeping the algorithm happy. So if you could just take a few seconds and give us some acknowledgement wherever you're listening or watching, it's one of those things. It really does go a long way, and we super appreciate it.
Yes, we do. It makes our day. That's another one. We're like, did you see we got another review? So yeah, we genuinely get excited about all this stuff. So it's pretty cool because I think neither of us ever anticipated that we'd have nearly as many listeners as we do and all that kind of stuff. So it never gets old. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's it. I thought it was going to be friends and family that listen to us occasionally. I'm
Kitty play.
Still, yeah. I'm still consistently shocked that other people that we don't know actually listen to us. So that's pretty cool.
Doesn't get old. So yeah, pop a review in, give us a like. We get excited. All right. So we've completed 2 tilts and in under an hour. We were on fire today.
We were.
So good.
We just have to try to record 4 times for everyone, as if we have the time in our life to record it 4 times. So hopefully if this doesn't work, you're not getting tilts 11 and 12. I'm just putting that out there. If something has gone wrong with this,
they're cursed.
Yep.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness. Well, good times, everyone. We hope you've taken something away from today's conversation, and we will be back next week with more tilts. We are nearing the end of our book. And yeah, in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.